Welcome to your personalized deep dive. You know, we were looking through the historiographical dossier you requested today, and, well, it got me thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because if you pick up a modern video game today, or even like a highly produced legacy board game, there's this underlying, almost invisible expectation of guidance.
Right. It's totally baked into the design.
Exactly. You know the feeling. A glowing objective marker suddenly appears on your mini-map, or a brightly colored yellow ledge shows you exactly where you're supposed to climb.
Or a quest giver has a literal glowing exclamation point hovering over their head.
Yes, all of that.
I mean, the system is fundamentally engineered to hold your hand.
Yeah.
Game developers spend millions of dollars ensuring that you never, ever miss the intended curated experience.
Yeah.
It's a very safe, very tested environment.
Safe is the perfect word for it. It's like a guided tour. But then you crack open this exhaustive dossier we have in front of us, focusing on a little 32-page paper booklet published way back in 1981.
Right, the classic module.
Yeah, an advanced Dungeons & Dragons module called The Secret of Bone Hill, and suddenly every single one of those modern safety rails just vanishes into thin air.
Absolutely gone.
We are looking at a piece of design that essentially dropped the player into the wilderness, shrugged, and just said, figure it out yourself.
It is the absolute definition of jumping into the deep end without a lifeguard on duty. And what we're exploring today isn't just about the mechanics of some vintage tabletop game.
Right.
It's really a deep dive into the very origins of emergent narrative design. We're looking at how handing an audience a complex, breathing framework rather than a pre-written linear script fundamentally changed the landscape of interactive entertainment.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to truly understand why a tiny 32-page paper booklet from 1981 was so revolutionary, we have to look at what the tabletop role-playing industry actually looked like before it arrived.
Yeah, the landscape was almost unrecognizable compared to today. I mean, prior to 1981, the industry standard for these adventure modules was something historians call the Funhouse Dungeon.
The Funhouse Dungeon.
Right. Think about legendary early modules, like the Tomb of Horrors. They were essentially decontextualized obstacle courses.
Just totally disconnected from any real logic.
Exactly. They were highly artificial underground environments designed with one primary overarching goal: to aggressively test player skill and, well, more often than not, to ruthlessly kill their characters.
It's just like going to a theme park haunted house. You get in the plastic cart, you follow the literal rails to the exit, you react to the jump scares as they pop out of the dark, and you survive. Or you don't.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But you never stop the cart to ask where the zombies buy their groceries. Or, like, why a fire-breathing demon is living in a 10-by-10 stone room right next to an ice monster.
Because there was no logical ecosystem to question. The monsters in a funhouse dungeon were just chess pieces placed on a board to drain your resources. But The Secret of Bone Hill, which was authored by Lenard Lakofka, completely shatters that funhouse paradigm.
Right. He introduces this place called Restenford. It's a small town on the fictional Lendor Isle. And the absolute shocker here is that when your characters arrive, there is no world-ending threat.
None at all.
There is no evil wizard threatening to blow up the moon. There is no linear sequence of events. There's not even a ticking clock.
It's just a geographically and socially dense fishing port.
Yeah. It's like being plucked out of that theme park haunted house, dropped onto a random street corner in a living, breathing, chaotic new city, and just being told to see what happens.
And that feeling of a living city didn't just happen by accident. It was achieved through some brilliant, subtle design choices, particularly in the module's cartography.
Oh, the maps.
Right. The internal maps were drafted by David S. LaForest, known as Diesel in the industry. He introduced a massive innovation that seems incredibly obvious now, but was groundbreaking then.
What did he do?
Up until this point, module maps used a sterile alphanumeric grid system. You walk down the hallway to room 1A or room 2B.
Which feels very much like a tactical war game. It feels like you're just reading a spreadsheet.
Exactly. LaForce abandoned that sterile grid. He started putting named locations directly on the map. So instead of telling the dungeon master the players are entering Area 4, the map says they are entering Falco's Tavern or Peltar's Tower.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this seemingly tiny linguistic shift forces the person running the game to organically conceptualize the town as a real lived-in place. A tavern has smells, It has patrons, it has spilled ale. It's not just a geometric box to be cleared of enemies.
It fundamentally humanizes the map. And the audience for this game, I mean, they were starving for that kind of depth, weren't they?
Absolutely. The player base in the early 80s was maturing rapidly. They were moving past the phase of just wanting a weekend tactical diversion where they kicked down doors and looted chests.
Right.
They wanted what design historians now call Gygaxian naturalism. They wanted a cohesive secondary reality, a world that made logical, ecological sense, even when the players weren't actively looking at it.
Taking that desire for realism and actually building it is a massive leap, though. It's one thing to say, hey, this world is realistic, but it's another to mechanically enforce it using dice and math. And Lakofka went incredibly hard into what we'd call hyper-simulationism.
Oh, he really did. He built a living ecosystem. The danger wasn't just a monster waiting patiently in a room for the heroes to arrive. The environment itself was dynamic.
Like with Bone Hill itself, right? The ruined castle overlooking the town.
Exactly. Lakofka implemented a strict diurnal and nocturnal shift for the wildlife and the monsters.
So during the day, the ruins are occupied by bugbears and other humanoid tribes, which is dangerous, sure, but it's a conventional physical threat. You can fight a bugbear with a sword.
But when the sun goes down, those bugbears actively flee the ruins. They cede control of the hill to an array of level-draining undead creatures that literally rise from their graves.
Level draining.
Yeah, and for anyone unfamiliar with vintage D&D mechanics, level draining is perhaps the most terrifying concept in the game. It doesn't just damage your character's health. A hit from one of these undead creatures literally erases your character's experience points.
It permanently deletes hours, maybe even months, of real-world progress from your character sheet.
It's brutal.
It is. It's a psychological terror. It creates this shifting axis of dread where time suddenly becomes a critical resource. You can't just casually set up a campfire in the dungeon courtyard to bandage your wounds.
Right, because if the sun sets while you're sleeping, the entire ecological reality of the area turns mathematically lethal.
And speaking of the monsters themselves, Lakofka didn't just use standard vampires. He engineered entirely new apex predators for this night shift, like the ghoul sturge.
Oh, the ghoul sturge is a perfect encapsulation of Lakofka's thematic dread. He took a sturge, which is basically a blood-drinking, mosquito-like bird in the game's lore, and combined it with the paralyzing touch of a ghoul.
That is just awful.
I know, right? He took a common, annoying nuisance monster and elevated it into a highly lethal biological amalgamation perfectly suited for a nocturnal ecology. It hunts at night, it paralyzes you, and it drains your blood.
But he didn't just simulate the horrifying monsters. This is the part of the dossier that absolutely blew my mind. He mathematically simulated the mundane wildlife.
Yes, the woodland creatures.
Yeah. The text notes that if you walk into the woods, there is a defined 40% probability that a woodland animal, like a raccoon or a fox, will approach your party to beg for food. And if the players make camp, that probability jumps to a 90% chance.
It's incredibly detailed.
And he didn't stop there. He integrated these incredibly complex, highly volatile potion miscibility tables so that mixing 2 magical liquids in your backpack was a literal science experiment that could cause an explosion. He even leaned heavily into convoluted psionics rules.
Right, psionics being a sort of mental magic, telepathy, mind control, sci-fi powers that existed in a completely separate, mathematically dense subsystem.
Right.
Most contemporary designers and players were actively ignoring psionics because the rules were simply too complicated to run at a normal table. But Lakofka hard-coded them into the DNA of the adventure.
And this is where I have to push back on this design philosophy. Because as a player, or just someone consuming a story, doesn't this extreme level of mundane bookkeeping completely tank the narrative pacing?
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm sitting down at a table with my friends to play out a heroic fantasy epic, and suddenly we have to pause the game, consult a chart, and roll percentile dice to see if a raccoon wants a piece of my beef jerky.
Yeah.
At what point does simulationist realism actually ruin the fantasy?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the friction is the point. Treating the natural world with the exact same mechanical weight as a goblin ambush forces players to respect the environment.
Okay, I see.
The wilderness transforms from a painted theatrical backdrop into an active, breathing entity. Sometimes it's hostile, sometimes it's just hungry, but it is always present. You aren't just fighting monsters, you are surviving an ecosystem. And because the wilderness is so aggressively alive, the players desperately need the safety of the town to survive.
Except the town of Restenford is barely safer.
True.
The danger just shifts from physical claws to social manipulation because of the massive information asymmetry.
Yeah, Restenford is described in our sources as a Lovecraftian Peyton place. The mundane, everyday life of a fishing village sits side by side with the macabre.
Imagine you are the player sitting at the table listening to this deep dive. When your character enters this town, you aren't greeted with a clear quest. You are immediately hit with a massive rumor table.
Over 30 distinct rumors.
Right. And some are absolute truths, some are partial truths, and some are straight-up malicious lies. The bartender tells you one thing, the blacksmith whispers another. You have to navigate this socially. You have to piece together the reality of the town before you ever draw a sword.
You really do. You have to be incredibly careful who you trust, because the town's key figures are defined by hidden corruption.
Like Abbot Qualton.
Yes, take Abbot Qualton, for example. On paper, to the public, he's a highly respected cleric of good alignment. He runs the local temple. But behind the scenes, the dungeon master knows that Qualton survived a devastating psionic blast to the mind, which left him with a magically induced form of schizophrenia.
Which means the person running the game has to literally role-play a character shifting into a megalomaniacal state, maybe mid-conversation, because Qualton is secretly plotting to usurp the throne by marrying the Baron's daughter.
Exactly. Then there is Volsifar. He's described as a Waghalter assassin, meaning he's a professional executioner, a garroter who strangles his targets, operating right under everyone's noses.
Wait, how does an evil assassin live in a lawful town without being caught by magical lie detectors?
Well, he wears a magic ring permanently set to cast a mask alignment spell. It cloaks his evil aura, so to any magical scanning, he registers as a completely lawful, normal citizen.
Wow. So the true danger isn't necessarily a dragon on a mountain, it's the guy sipping a pint of ale at the tavern next to you. Which culminates in the actual titular secret of Bone Hill itself.
Right.
You spend all this time dodging assassins and ghoul birds, you finally reach the ruined castle, and the big secret is, well, incredibly subdued. It's not a cosmic horror. It's not a sleeping god waiting to destroy the world.
No, not at all. The grand climax of the entire module is finding a secret door in the true ceiling of a ruined treasure loft. Behind that door is a compartment lined with lead.
To stop the magic detection spells.
Exactly. The lead lining ensures that magic detection spells bounce off of it. And inside that mundane hidden box is a ring of genie summoning and its servant, a being named Belushi. That's it. It's a tangible material reward.
It perfectly encapsulates Lakofka's whole philosophy. The reward is a historical artifact of your exploration, not the resolution of a cinematic world-saving narrative arc.
Right.
But again, I have to ask, if the module is just this unmotivated sandbox, if these incredibly detailed NPCs exist with their daily schedules, but there are no explicit quest hooks, no dramatic tension, forcing the players to act, aren't the players just wandering aimlessly? If nobody in town tells you to go to the Haunted Hill, why on earth would you go?
Well, this raises an important question about game design. And the answer is that this is the purest expression of player agency. It forces the players to generate their own intrinsic motivations.
Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah. You go to the hill because you are curious, or because you need gold to buy better armor, or because you want to uncover the truth behind the conflicting lies you were told in the tavern. Furthermore, you have to deduce that lore via diegetic storytelling.
Diegetic storytelling meaning the story is told through the environment itself, right? Not through a narrator reading a script.
Exactly that. The game doesn't hand you a diary explaining what happened to the castle. You have to look at the broken siege engines in the courtyard or analyze the trajectory of the wall breaches and figure out how the fortress fell. It relies entirely on your active intellectual engagement rather than reading you a wall of exposition text.
It's an incredible level of trust in the audience. But, what is truly wild to me is that this intricate, meticulously balanced, living world of Restenford was birthed out of a real-world corporate environment that was completely chaotic.
Oh, it was a mess.
The pristine world of the game directly contrasts with the total mess of the company publishing it.
Right, because to understand how The Secret of Bone Hill made it to print in 1981, you have to look at the state of TSR, the company that owned Dungeons & Dragons at the time. The dossier describes 1981 as a period of massive financial success but severe internal turmoil. Historians refer to it as the 1981 TSR purge.
The company was flush with cash. D&D had become a mainstream cultural phenomenon, so they were making unprecedented revenue. But the leadership, specifically the Bloom brothers who managed the finances and Gary Gygax, were spending that money recklessly.
Very
They
reckless.
were rapidly expanding, spinning up bizarre side projects and demanding continuous, rushed product releases just to keep the cash flow moving.
And amidst all this, Len Lakofka wasn't even a formal salaried TSR employee.
Really?
No, he was a titan of the early old guard wargaming community. He had actually helped Gygax run the very first Gen Con gaming convention years prior. He had been running this specific Restenford campaign in his own living room for years, specifically for a family called the Nystals.
Which is where the famous game spell Nystal's magic aura comes from.
Exactly.
He had thoroughly stress-tested this world with real people. So
Right.
Brian Bloom, acting as a company executive, goes to Lakofka and commissions him to write 3 adventures. And the payout for this contract, I almost choked when I read the numbers in the dossier. They paid him $10,500.
Which, when you break down a manuscript of roughly 10,000 words, equates to over $1 a word.
Just to give you, the listener, some context on how insane that is, even today in the modern era, standard professional rates for freelance RPG writing hover around 5 to 10 cents a word.
Right.
Best-selling fiction authors rarely command 25 cents a word. To hand a freelancer $1 a word in 1981 for a 32-page booklet is an absolute staggering anomaly. It was basically a blank check handed to a founder's friend.
It highlights the aggressive, almost erratic economic strategy of the company during its golden age. They were throwing absurd amounts of money at their old guard friends, while simultaneously engaging in internal power struggles that resulted in the purge.
Wow.
Yeah, foundational developers and editors were literally being fired, meaning the editing department was severely strained and overworked.
And that strained editing department is the direct mechanism behind what I am calling the $10,000 typo.
Oh yes, the typo.
Because they rushed this incredibly expensive manuscript to print, massive errors slipped through. In the module, there is an elven NPC named Pello. Pello will only join your party if you promise to resurrect him if he dies in battle. Makes sense, right? A good insurance policy.
Very logical.
Except, under the strict first edition rules that Lakofka loved so much, elves cannot be brought back to life with standard cleric spells. Their souls work differently. They strictly require a specific, highly rare magical item called a Rod of Resurrection.
And if you scan the entire 32-page booklet, that required item literally does not exist anywhere in the module's loot tables or local temples.
The editors accidentally allowed a mechanical impossibility to be permanently embedded in the text.
That's pretty amazing.
And the editors weren't the only ones struggling with this module. The art department was in open revolt. You have this groundbreaking front cover painted by Bill Willingham. It's a dynamic, awesome depiction of a female spellcaster in crimson, kind of a homage to the Scarlet Witch in a point-blank magical duel with a skeleton.
It was fantastic art.
It really broke the tired trend of just showing armored muscle men hitting dragons.
Right, but flip that booklet over, however, and you see the back cover illustrated by Errol Otis. This is where the behind-the-scenes drama bleeds right onto the page. Otis was an artist whose sensibilities thrived on weird fantasy, alien landscapes, and gonzo pulp action.
Okay.
He allegedly hated the mundane, hyper-simulationist realism of The Secret of Bone Hell. He felt that cramming all these diverse encounters into such a small, logically mapped geographic area completely ruined his suspension of disbelief.
So, feeling creatively stifled, what does he do? He engages in literal artistic sabotage.
He really did.
He is tasked with drawing a subterranean Hydra-like beast, and he deliberately botches the illustration. He draws this terrifying multi-headed monster, but gives it these comically tiny, disproportionate, useless little wings. It was a silent protest, printed right on the back of the final product.
Incredible.
So, what does this all mean? To me, it sounds exactly like a wildly funded Silicon Valley startup today. You have all this venture capital cash burning a hole in their pocket. They are handing out insane freelance contracts to their buddies. The internal structure is collapsing under the weight of its own growth. And the creatives are so frustrated they are hiding protest Easter eggs in the shipped software.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this bizarre aesthetic clash, the brilliant cover versus the sabotage back, perfectly represents the friction of the entire industry at that specific moment in 1981.
How so?
You had writers like Lakofka striving for granular, mathematically heavy simulationism, desperately trying to create a secondary reality. And on the other side, you had artists and players who just wanted gonzo pulp fantasy action.
Yeah.
The secret of Bone Hill is the literal battleground where those two opposing philosophies collided.
And the craziest part of this entire story is that out of that messy collision, out of the typos, the artistic sabotage, and Lakofka's stubborn simulationism, came these incredible happy accidents that left an enduring legacy on gaming.
Yeah, like the Hendrix Cup. Lakofka was fiercely protective of his ecological realism. During that chaotic editing phase, an editor named Kevin Hendricks designed a highly detailed lizardman encounter to place in the wilderness around Restenford.
Okay.
Lakofka read it and demanded it be completely removed. He argued that, ecologically, a lizardman tribe simply didn't fit the climate and mathematical probability tables he had designed for the Isle.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Hendricks takes his cut lizardman encounter and sets it aside. He keeps working on it privately. Eventually, Hendricks gets fired in the infamous TSR purge. The unfinished notes are passed to another writer, Douglas Niles, who finishes the concept.
Right.
That cut content from Bonehill became a completely separate module called Against the Cult of the Reptile God, Module N1, which is widely considered by historians today to be one of the greatest, most narrative-driven introductory modules ever published.
Wow.
All because Lakofka stubbornly refused to compromise his ecosystem.
It's a fantastic legacy. And, Lakofka's strict vision also gave us the very first appearance of a monster called the Spectator, which is a passive, lawful, neutral cousin to the iconic floating beholder.
Oh, I've heard of those.
Instead of immediately attacking the players with eye lasers, it tries to communicate and implant magical suggestions. And just to scratch his itch for dense combat mechanics, Lakofka gave the Spectator a highly specific 5% magic resistance, tailored only to unreflected spells. The ripple effects of his rigid mechanical vision are woven into the very DNA of the game decades later.
So we've gone from the deadly, arbitrary funhouse dungeons to a living, breathing, terrifying ecosystem where you have to barter with raccoons, navigate schizophrenic abbots, and survive tiny winged hydras. What is the core takeaway for you listening to this deep dive?
Well, I think it's that the secret of Bone Hill proved definitively that you don't need a monologuing villain to make a story work. You don't need a world-ending cataclysm or a glowing objective marker to create a memorable, lasting experience. Sometimes, a sleepy fishing village, a dark hill, and a robust framework of rules are enough.
I love that.
And that concept extends far beyond vintage tabletop games. Whether you are leading a corporate team, designing software, or creating art, providing a detailed, logical framework and truly trusting your audience or your collaborators to carve their own path often yields much richer, more emergent results than forcing them down a rigid, predetermined path.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, Lakofka's true masterpiece wasn't his maps or his encounter tables. It was his absolute trust in the players.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up. We started this deep dive by talking about modern games holding your hand. If hyper-detailed environmental simulationism and absolute unmotivated player agency was the cutting edge of design, in a 32-page paper booklet back in 1981, have modern, heavily scripted, billion-dollar digital video games actually regressed in how they handle true player freedom?
It's a great question.
Are we just back in the theme park haunted house cart, riding on invisible rails, pretending we're exploring a city? Something to think about the next time a glowing yellow arrow tells you exactly where to go. Keep diving deep, everyone.